Valley students, and welcome to week number 2 of Psych 102, our introduction to psychology. Many of you have commented about last week and about things that you learned or were excited about that really made you stop to think and realize that we study a little bit of everything and understanding the human person, human individual. Psychology encompasses this broad field of many different things about age or development or workplace or whatever. There's a psychology for all of that. And as you started to try to narrow down your focus for a research paper, you were reminded of that again, that how big and broad things are. And so we were able to talk about your interest and your major and try to find some psychology that pertain to that. And so I hope we did, and I hope many of you are working on that religiously, trying to get towards finishing that paper in week 3. This week we have equally as much materials to cover. I mean, honestly, there are lots of things that we want to talk about that are just touching the hem of the garment. In fact, most of these things, as my professor told me years ago, you find a postage stamp you're interested in and you spend the rest of your life reading and writing about it, and that's kind of how these things are. One of the major points that I believe you'll be very interested in is how we learn. Now, we just sometimes assume that everybody learns the same way and that you're able to get it, the same way your neighbor does, but that's very different, very, very different than that, because learning can be visual. It can be, some people learn by taking notes and PowerPoints on the screen. Others like a teacher that's more animated, or you like visuals, or you like movies, or you like lectures. And that's one of the reasons that I try to use video, because even though it's not a nice thing to have to look at me every week, it does kind of change things up, and it makes it more inviting, maybe makes me more human. I'm not a computer. And so we learn differently. And so I think that is an interesting way to look at that as we think about learning. How do you learn? What is easy for you? What's difficult for you? What subjects are easy for you? We fail to realize there are different kind of brains as well. There are people that have what I call a math brain. They can do calculus and trig and algebra and all those things. And then there are others that have what I call the humanities brain. You're much better at histories and English and literature and that kind of thing. I think in the human population you will find both of those kinds of people, and very rarely do you find a person that has both of those abilities. The other part of learning that is going to be interesting, I think, to you this week is the idea of memory. How do we remember things? Now, I hate to burst your bubble. Some of you have lots of excuses that you lean on. Well, I just don't have a good memory. That's Boulder Dash. Memory is what you make it. Memory is what you build out of it. In fact, for years, I've been planning to write a book called How to Work Less or Study Less and Make Better Grades, because in learning and memory and repetition and retention, to be honest with you, I believe 90% of students study the wrong way. They do not study in a way that helps them retain information. Your memory is what you make it. Now, you can affect it by lots of different things. You can affect it by drugs. You can affect it by loss of sleep, one of the things that we talked about last week. A lot of different things will affect your memory and your thinking. As you get older, that's part of developmental psychology. How does your memory change as you age? How does your memory change, or your thinking change as you age? A part of that is going to be wrapped up in language. And one of the things that we probably don't really understand is how human beings acquire language. Now, some of you are parents, some of you have children, some of you have gone through that process of them learning to speak and to read and to write. And humans are the only group that have been able to master. Notice I said master that. You'll have some people argue that chimpanzees have some skills, and they do have some skills, but not on the level of human beings. And what about intelligence? Are some of you more intelligent than others? Those of you with poor self-esteem said, yes, they are. There are people smarter than I am. Those that have high self-esteem said, no, I'm the smartest guy in the room. But intelligence, we have recently discovered, can be improved and changed and you could be intelligent if you want to be. So that's important. We're going to talk about the theories of intelligence and the theories of gender. Guys and gals are different. Men and women are different. Girls and boys are different. How do they mature? How do they go through the development process? How do they reach maturity? What happens to them during maturing processes? And what happens to them as they age and get older? And that's a very, very important part of what we want to talk about this week. I think you'll find these things exciting. Some of the textbook, as you read it, may be hard to understand, but I would read it anyway and at least put it into my brain. And as you go along and develop your understanding of psychology, many of those things will begin to click and come together. The last thing we're going to talk about is another thing I think you'll find fascinating, and that's the idea of motivation and emotion. Do you know how much time I spend on a Valley course trying to motivate you to learn, motivate you to get your work done, motivate you to contact me with questions? One of the most difficult things as a teacher at Valley is to get students to talk to them. I run after you, begging you, call me, email me when you have questions. I got my first phone call from a Valley student after having taught here for years last semester. I almost had a stroke. It just doesn't happen. But so much of what you do motivates you. How does hunger motivate you? It makes you start looking for a McDonald's or a Wendy's or whatever because you are motivated by that. Hunger is a big motivator. The desire for better income. Why are you a student at Valley College? Because you want to make a better, you're motivated by that desire to make a better life for yourself and your children and your family. Don't lose sight of that motivation because it can spur you through some really difficult times. And then there's always this thing of emotion. We're very emotional people. Some of us more than others. But emotion drives a lot of people. I mean, religion drives a lot of people. What kind of religion would motivate you to take up guns and go out and kill other people who aren't like you? So these motivations are very important. Eating, as we've said, is huge. And we'll discuss eating disorders like bulimia. There's a bunch of those where you have this sense of that you're fat or sense that you're skinny. Some of you may suffer from that. That's a very real disorder and one that you have to work on. So you see, psychology, it meets us right where we live, and that's why it's so important. So I'm looking forward this week to the discussion and your work as you continue on your research paper. I am available. I'm running after you. I'm asking you to call me or write to me or email me if you have problems. And remember, never run from a teacher who's running after you trying to help you. Rule number one. Okay? Look forward to our interaction this week in the discussion boards. I hope you will go back. I try to answer every discussion board with something. Last week was the idea of the senses and which one you would give up if you had to sacrifice one. Most people picked taste because they thought that was the least important. And I shared with some of you a story of my friend who was a pastor's wife who during stomach surgery they accidentally clipped the nerve that connected her stomach to her taste buds. And she could not taste anything. Eating for her was like eating cardboard. She could not smell because it destroyed her smell, as though she couldn't tell when something was rotten or just, something wrong with it. So, she lived 30, 40, 50 years having to eat to live and having somebody else to help her with cooking and things that were where she might, inadvertently poison her family. So those are very complicated things. You can't just willy-nilly pick one and say, oh, I would do this. That's a big choice. Okay, I'll let you go, and we will talk to you next time.